In this talk, we will learn about biogeochemical cycles and their role in ecosystems. An ecosystem includes all the organisms that live in a particular location, as well as the abiotic factors that are present in that location, which the organisms interact with. Biogeochemical cycles are chemicals that move through these ecosystems. These chemicals are used in biotic as well as abiotic processes. Biogeochemical cycles are able to cross the boundaries of ecosystems. What we mean by that is that one ecosystem might import or export chemicals to another ecosystem. There are different types of biogeochemical cycles, which include the carbon cycle, water cycle, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, oxygen cycle, and others like sulfur cycle. Carbon is a major part of the bodies of different organisms. Some organisms can perform metabolic reactions that make non-gaseous carbon-containing compounds, like organic compounds, from gaseous carbon compounds, like carbon dioxide. For example, the process of photosynthesis can fix the atmospheric carbon dioxide into organic compounds in the Calvin-Benson cycle. The process of photosynthesis introduces carbon into primary producers like plants and algae. This carbon can then be transported into terrestrial animals as well as aquatic animals and other types of organisms when they consume the plants. When organisms die, the carbon remains in their body. If enough time passes, geological processes can occur that convert these organic compounds to other types of carbon compounds like coal and petroleum that are present in fossil fuels. Carbon dioxide can be returned to the atmosphere through the process of aerobic cellular respiration that can happen in all organisms, including microbes, plants, and animals, whether they be in land or water. Additionally, human activity that requires burning of fossil fuels can also release carbon dioxide in the air. In addition to carbon dioxide, carbon can also be present in the air as methane. Methane is usually made by methanogens, which are prokaryotes. Both carbon dioxide and methane are greenhouse gases that trap heat within the Earth's atmosphere and hence cause global warming. Human activities can cause the carbon cycle to proceed faster in one direction over time. It has been speculated that this can cause large consequences if it is allowed to continue for many years. Well, the time has come where this is causing large consequences. The Earth's present reserves of coal and other types of fossil fuels were built over millennia. However, we are burning through these fossil fuels at an unprecedented rate. This human burning of fossil fuels causes a huge imbalance in the carbon cycle. One of this is the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This increase in carbon dioxide is causing accelerating climate change, which can cause other types of unprecedented problems. Let us look at the water cycle. All life on Earth depends on the presence of water. The amount of water that is present in the environment determines the nature and abundance of organisms present in that environment or ecosystem. Water can be synthesized and it can also be broken down. Water can be synthesized during cellular respiration by the breakdown of sugars. It can also be broken down during photosynthesis to form oxygen. The basic water cycle involves the evaporation of water from the Earth's surface into the atmosphere. This evaporation can occur directly on the surfaces of lakes or rivers, as well as oceans. In the case of terrestrial ecosystems, evaporation also occurs, and 90% of this evaporation is through plants by the process of transpiration. The water that evaporates is present as water vapor in the atmosphere. This gaseous water vapor then cools and falls to the surface in the form of precipitation or rainfall. This is a multi-step process which involves the condensation of the gaseous water vapor to ultimately form droplets of water which fall in the form of precipitation. The precipitation is important because it refills water bodies like lakes, rivers, as well as oceans. Precipitation, when it happens on land, can also refill the water table, which gives rise to the groundwater that is present on land. Changes in the supply of water to an ecosystem can have many changes on the nature of that ecosystem. The process of deforestation that is usually done by humans disrupts the local water cycle. The water that falls as rain drains away and hence is not retained by the land. In such scenarios, we can completely alter the landscape. A tropical rainforest can be turned into a semi-arid desert. Humans also tend to harvest groundwater for agricultural purposes. The overharvesting of groundwater is also detrimental to ecosystems. In fact, it is predicted that water shortages in the future may cause enormous civic unrest. Hence, it is important to manage water wisely. The nitrogen cycle involves the cycling of nitrogen through ecosystems. Nitrogen is present in all proteins and nucleic acids. It is usually the element in shortest supply in the environment. This is surprising considering the atmosphere has 78% nitrogen gas. However, this 78% nitrogen gas is not readily available. This is because most plants and animals cannot use nitrogen gas as a source of nitrogen. They instead use nitrogen-containing compounds like ammonia and nitrates. Thus, the nitrogen has to be fixed. The process of nitrogen fixation is the synthesis of nitrogen-containing compounds from gaseous nitrogen. The process of fixing nitrogen is called nitrification. It usually involves the conversion of nitrogen to ammonia, and the ammonia can then be converted to nitrates. The process of denitrification is the opposite, where the nitrates can be converted to nitrogen gas. Both of these processes, nitrification and denitrification, are usually carried out by microorganisms. These microorganisms can be free-living microbes or they can be associated with the roots of plants. Now let us look at how nitrogen cycles in ecosystems. The nitrogen that is present in the environment can be fixed by the soil microbes, whether they be terrestrial or aquatic, in order to form ammonia and nitrates. This ammonia and nitrates are then taken up by plant tissues. These plants again can be terrestrial or aquatic. The nitrogen taken up by these plants is then accumulated in their tissues and that can be passed on to animals that consume these plants. We do have both terrestrial and aquatic animals that are able to obtain their nitrogen from plants. Living organisms then excrete nitrogenous waste products, which allows the nitrogen to go back into the environment. They can excrete nitrogenous waste products in the form of urea or in the form of ammonia. Ammonia is normally excreted out by organisms that live in water, while urea is excreted by terrestrial organisms. Organisms can also excrete nitrogen in the form of uric acid. We can also have scenarios where nitrogen returns to the atmosphere through the decomposition of different types of tissues. These tissues can arise from plants as well as animals. This causes the ammonia and nitrates to come back into the ecosystems and can be used by plants again. The use of fertilizers and nitrogenous wastes by humans have radically altered the global nitrogen cycle. This has resulted in the doubling of the rate of transfer of nitrogen into its usable forms in both soil as well as water. When nitrogen content increases dramatically in water, it usually creates algal blooms. These algal blooms can disrupt life in water by not allowing oxygen to enter into the water, and thereby many organisms in the water die due to lack of oxygen. The phosphorus cycle describes the flow of phosphorus in ecosystems. Phosphorus is required by all organisms because it is present in nucleic acids, membranes, and energy storage compounds like ATP. Phosphorus is not present in the environment as a gas, but is found in rocks and minerals in the form of phosphates. The weathering of rocks brings soluble forms of phosphates into soil as well as water. These organic soluble phosphates can be taken up by the roots of different types of plants. The plant then is able to incorporate the phosphates into its tissues. Animals eat these plants and are able to obtain phosphorus in that way. The phosphorus can return back into the environment through excretion as well as decomposition processes. This provides soluble phosphorus back into the environment where it can be used again. Humans have impacted the phosphorus cycle through the use of fertilizers. Fertilizers are usually rich in nitrogen as well as phosphorus, and hence can affect both the nitrogen and phosphorus cycle. The excess of phosphate due to the presence of fertilizers can increase the phosphate content in water and create algal blooms the way excess nitrogen can create algal blooms. These algal blooms can disrupt life in water. Oxygen is an important component in living organisms because it is present in all macromolecules. Oxygen is present in the atmosphere as molecular gaseous oxygen. It is needed by all aerobic organisms for respiration purposes. Respiration allows organisms to obtain energy. Animals, plants, fungi, and many different microbes perform respiration where they use oxygen. Oxygen can also be used by humans for burning substances like fossil fuels. Respiration as well as combustion utilize oxygen and produce carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide gas can be used by primary producers like plants. They use this carbon dioxide to make organic compounds using photosynthesis, and in the process, they release oxygen back to the environment. Efficient biogeochemical cycling is imperative for the health of an ecosystem. An experiment was performed on the biogeochemical cycling in a forest ecosystem. The scientists found that undisturbed forests were very efficient at retaining nutrients, while disturbed forests, where the trees were cut down, showed an amount of water runoff to increase by 40%. This indicated that the soil was not retaining water very efficiently. The scientists also found that there was a loss of calcium as well as nitrates. They did not observe a loss of phosphorus, however. This indicates that when we intervene in ecosystems, we should be very mindful about how it affects the biogeochemical cycle of that ecosystem. With this, we come to the end of our talk, where we learned about biogeochemical cycles, which includes the carbon cycle, the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, as well as the oxygen cycle.